Midnight on Earth podcast with your host, Jake Weaver. Engineered by Cedric Swan. Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Midnight on Earth. I'm your host, Jake Weaver, and we're here to bring you more knowledge, more light, and more love. And more legends. I love when I talk to the legends, the people that have done so much work. We're all special light beings, but there's people that have really dedicated their life to service. And I love talking with these people. Andrew Collins is on the show today. Legendary researcher. He's been in the scene. If you're into the esoteric, new age, mystical, ancient civilizations, he's been in the scene for quite some time, over 30 years. And he has a new book talking about Karahan Tepe. And this place, it's mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. The discoveries, what we're finding there, it's going to blow you away. But first, I need you to do something for me. Follow me on Instagram at midnight_on_earth. That is the address. You can follow me there. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you go to get your podcasts, click that button that connects us so you know exactly what's going on. You get a notification to your device or wherever you get those things, and tell a friend, tell someone that you know that loves these type of podcasts. When we have people like Andrew Collins on the show, it's a big deal. You want to get this out to those people, tell them, bring them here. midnightonearth.com. Okay, we're going to talk to Andrew in just 1 second, but we have to read his bio. So here we go. Andrew Collins is a science and history writer who has investigated the true origins of human civilization for more than 30 years. He is the co-discoverer of a massive cave complex beneath the Giza Plateau, now known as Collins's Cave. The author of several books, including Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe, he regularly appears on radio shows, podcasts, and TV series, including Ancient Aliens, The Unexplained with William Shatner, and Lost Worlds. He lives in Essex, England currently, and he's here with us today. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Jake. Good to be here today.
Wow.
Coming at you from the UK on a fairly cold evening, but we're good to go.
Well, we're in Portland, Oregon on a fairly cold morning, so here we go. But I just really appreciate you being here. It's an incredible honor. You've done so much work. You've been out there helping all of us grow as humans, uncovering this. Thank you for doing all of that work. I have to just say that first.
Cool. Thank you very much. I mean, it just comes naturally, so it's no great effort to try and solve the mysteries of the universe.
Right. You feel inclined to it. Now, I want to ask you this. This was something I was thinking about as I was reading your book. Do you feel like this is a past life connection for you personally? Do you have past lives at Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, Egypt? What do you think about that? Just personally, your own life.
Well, I mean, as far as past lives at Göbekli Tepe or Karahan Tepe, I would think that would actually be quite a difficult time to have lived. I mean, you're talking just after a major cataclysm, which devastated the world. Everybody would still have been in a state of fear when all of these incredible enclosures and stone structures were being built 11 to 12,000 years ago. So I'm not sure if I'd even want a past life then, because I think it would be quite heavy. Egypt is another matter, obviously. It's a very romantic place. And, you know, we could all see ourselves, you know, standing alongside, you know, Cleopatra or Nefertiti, or in my case, Sobek Neferu, who I've written a whole book about, you know, the first female that ever wore the crowns, both of Upper and Lower Egypt. So, yeah, I mean, that would be great to have an Egyptian one. Not sure about Göbekli and Karahan. I think I'd rather just experience it, you know, firsthand when we go there on our tours and our research trips, and then just, you know, step back out of it, basically.
Sure. as an analyst with your analytical, intellectual, and psychic mind, but you do have some sort of connection to those places. There's something that's calling you there. What do you think that is?
Well, since we're amongst friends, I mean, throughout my life, I've worked with psychics, and I don't just mean people that stand up on a stage and, talk to your Aunt Sally or something like that. I'm talking about my best friends are incredibly psychic in nature. They don't advertise it. In some ways, it's a burden on their life, but we utilize this ability to explore the mysteries of the past in meditations, on quests, on-site visits, and whatever. And I value this information. It can't be used as anatomical evidence of anything, really. However, it helps. It gives you pointers in which direction your research can go. It makes links that maybe you wouldn't have got if you were just simply reading books or speaking to archaeologists. So that's a very valuable thing to me. And I've learned to trust it over the years. And because of that trust, the friends that I work with, trust me to work together with them to try and find answers, really. I mean, I took some of them over to Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe in March this year, and incredible stuff happened, including a photograph, which we'll come on to maybe later, of what appears to be a djinn, basically, quite literally.
Whoa.
But that's a story which we might get on to by the end of this interview. But
I better write that down.
But it's, yes. So it is a quest of discovery for me. Of course, as I said, psychic information is simply psychic information. You cannot really use it in books to try and prove a point, but it does help you point your research in certain directions. And that is very, very important.
Wow. Yes. Your intuition. We all have these gifts. I've talked to many psychics, like you say, legitimate, true psychics that just have that as part of their lifestyle. And they all talk about this. They all talk about these gifts and how you can tap into this knowledge that's there, whether through the Akashic records or through your own intuition. You're able to aggregate information and interface with it in such a way that you can interpret it correctly.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for me, a good Saturday night is doing a meditation with my very good friend, Richard. Now, he's an author in his own right, written various books, but we sit down and we focus on a particular topic. Now, let's say it's, Karahan Tepe. We will sit down. I light a few candles, get some incense going, maybe, something in the middle of the room that will link us with the site. And then I'll go through a meditation where, we raise light, but then go off to our destination, which, as I say, let's say it's Karahan Tepe. We'll visualize ourselves arriving there. Now, this can be in the past, it can be in the present, it could be somewhere in between. And we'll look for information, and that information often comes from somebody that presents himself, maybe a shaman, maybe a priest, maybe a woman doing something, there, or, something will be there to act as an interface between us and the site itself. Because in many ways, we need that interface. We need a human face to say, hey, I can give you some information. And then that information will start flowing. We'll come out of the meditation. We'll share what we've picked up, and then go back in.
Wow.
And we do it 4 times. The first 2 times, are like sort of just exploratory. The third time is we concentrate on the strongest image of the night so far, and then the fourth part, the final part, we just let our minds go and see what comes up. And anything could come in then. It could be related to the same theme. It may be something else that wants to come through. And, that to me is a good evening. Well, I mean, then Richard goes home and I watch Match of the Day football.
Well, I would say that's incredible because you're actually utilizing these tools with these other psychics to try to get information from those other dimensions. Wherever that information's stored, however you can access it, you're actively going towards that with the techniques that you're using. That's mind-blowing. And it's actually avant-garde. It's revolutionary, you could say, because most mainstream archaeologists are not doing this, but it's so powerful. And then how many times did the information that you brought back in those sessions show itself in some way, reveal itself, or perhaps you find something that you were imaging?
Well, I mean, this is the type of thing. Now, I'm not going to give exact sites here, but recently we concentrated on what's known as a Cursus monument in Scotland. This is a very long linear trackway that's got banks and ditches on either side, because it had come up in research and we wanted to know more information about it. And Richard started picking up information, not about the actual Cursus monument, but a mound that was beyond it. And he could see a guy who was metal detecting there. Now you think this is random, this is very strange. So he goes up to this guy, this is in meditation, remember, and says, what are you doing? And this guy is night hawking. In other words, he's illegally on this site, metal detecting, and he's discovered this stone ball, which is manufactured by the Neolithic peoples as much as 5,000 years ago. And this guy basically says this object started to, once I took it home, it started to affect my house. The electrical stuff started going wrong. And I just felt there was something, bad about this object, and I had to get rid of it. So I went down to the south of England. I sold it to a dealer, and I didn't even tell them where it came from. I gave them another site which was revealed in this communication, and just sold it and just got rid of it, basically. So this was the information that was picked up. Now, afterwards, after the meditation, we checked up. We found that this person, or again, I'm not going to give the name, was actually a metal detector, did actually live in the area concerned, right? And that, although we because he did it, secretly, we did pick up and find that exact stone ball that had been sold to a dealer at exactly the time that Richard said, which was in the early 1980s, and that it eventually, luckily, had found its way into a museum in Scotland. And I actually wrote to the museum and said to them, that I can give you more information about this particular stone ball, and it's not where it was said to have come from. It actually came from this particular site near this Cursus, and that you'll know that my words are true, because if you check into the receipts, you'll find that it was sold by this gentleman, and if that's correct, my word is true. Wow. So that's just one example. This came out just a few weeks ago. These people would be brilliant working with the police, solving crimes, but they don't want to do that. I mean, they just want to get on with their lives, write their books, do their research, lead a normal life, and here and there use their ability when necessary. So, that's just one tiny example of the sort of hits that we get. But here's the thing, working with psychic information is never 100% accurate.
Right.
The best is about 90% accuracy.
Right.
In other words, let's say for every 10 statements, one of those statements is going to be wrong, because the human mind has its frailties, and unfortunately, it means it cannot get stuff. Everything has to be filtered through from the subconscious mind into the conscious mind. And as that happens, it has to go through filters. And those filters will either put preconceptions, biases and things like that onto the information that can mean that it can come out wrong. But as I said, a good psychic their information will be anything up to 90% accurate. And my two best friends are that accurate in their
Wow.
information. That's as good as you're going to get.
Wow, that's so powerful. And yes, you're right. Even the best psychics, Edgar Casey, 90% accuracy. It's pretty well known because, like you said, the filters, there's the human aspect. You can train yourself. Obviously, the best psychics have trained themselves in some way, but still, we're working with the human experience and this other ethereal information. There's bound to be a little bit of distortion here and there. But let's talk a little bit about Karahan Tepe, because these are incredible sites, but this is the sister site actually to Göbekli Tepe, which was discovered in 1994. Can you briefly, very briefly, tell us about Göbekli Tepe and how they are connected?
Yeah, well, for me, the story goes back to 1995, and I was writing a book in the dark winter nights of that year that eventually became from a book called From the Ashes of Angels, which was published following year 1996. Basically, what this did was to look at all of the myths and legends relating to wisdom bringers in the Middle East, such as the Watchers of the Book of Enoch, and their offspring, the Nephilim, the Anunnaki of Mesopotamian tradition, the Immortals of Iranian tradition, and various other, similar sort of mythical beings, and how they gave us the rudiments of civilization. And what I concluded was that they were some kind of shamanic elite that had arrived in the area of eastern Turkey at the end of the last ice age from somewhere else in the ancient world, and that they basically helped kickstart civilization in an area which we know both as the cradle of civilization and as the Garden of Eden. Eden is a real place. It's mentioned in various occasions in the Bible, not only in connection with Adam and Eve. So this is the story of the foundation of our civilization, and this elite who I described as bird shamans, possibly wearing cloaks of feathers, possibly those of a vulture, which is a really important symbol of life and death in the early Neolithic, is that these people were incredibly important, and we need to find out who they were. They were mythologized. They are the Watchers. They are the Nephilim. They are the Anunnaki. So this was that book. I mean, it was a very successful book. It got to, I think, number 26 in the Times bestseller list. I mean,
Wow.
of all books. And what happened was that the book was eventually published in Turkey. This was in 2002, and 2 years later, I was finally able to get to Göbekli Tepe, which I'd known about now for about 4 years. And of course, when I saw Göbekli Tepe, in this glossy magazine in the year 2000 for the first time, I thought, well, there you go. That's your smoking gun of a lost civilization. And I was able to get there in 2004. And whilst I was in the area, I became aware of another site that had just been discovered called Karahan Tepe. And I saw a picture of this T-pillar with a snake crawling up the side of it, carved. And I looked at this and I thought, oh my God, I've got to find this site. This is clearly the same culture as Göbekli Tepe, but it looks different for some reason. So 2 days later, I was in the Tek Mountains, which is where Karahan Tepe is located. It's probably about 25 miles to the southeast of Göbekli Tepe. And I was there with a driver and an interpreter, and we were getting nowhere, to be honest. They were about to give up. We'd spent a couple of hours looking around, asking people, and nobody knew where it was. And finally, we spoke to this guy in full Arab dress on a tractor, and he sort of pointed in a certain direction. We went over there, we got to this farmhouse, and a little lad came out, and he pointed towards this hill, towards the south. So we walked towards that. And as I got closer, I started to see stone tools scattered about. And as I got closer and closer to the hill, they became more and more frequent until at the base there were hundreds, thousands of them everywhere. And I'd seen something similar as I was approaching Göbekli Tepe, because back in those days there was no roads. I had to walk across hills and across valleys and things to get to Göbekli Tepe. Well, I was doing the same, obviously, here for Karahan. But what I also saw were limestone right-angled fragments of what are known as porthole stones. Now, these are like entrances into long-lost enclosures, either in the side vertically, or some believe that they were, horizontal on the top of roofs. I mean, these were just scattered about. I mean, looking like windows out of a medieval building. I knew that they were probably as much as 11,000 years old.
Wow.
Plus, you could see the tops of these pillars, these T-pillars, just sticking out above the surface of the soil. And you knew that underneath here somewhere was a structure like Göbekli Tepe. So I went back to Karahan Tepe on many occasions between 2004 and 2018. I took, groups there. My colleague Hugh Newman and his partner JJ Ainsworth came with us on various occasions as well. We explored every cave, every nook, every cranny, every hill. We talked to local people to try and fully understand what was going on here. And then in 2018, we heard, or were told by the owners of the farm, that the University of Istanbul were about to survey the site in preparation for excavations.
Oh, wow.
And these excavations began the following year, 2019, under the directorship of Dr. Nezmi Carol of the University of Istanbul. And in 3 years, they uncovered the most incredible, and I'm going to describe it as virtually a lost city of the Anunnaki, basically.
Wow. Yeah, it's huge.
But what's so incredible about this is that this place, even though it has a lot of similarities with Göbekli Tepe, there are also a lot of differences, because 3 interconnected enclosures are cut out of the bedrock itself, providing us with the earliest evidence of what you might call rock architecture anywhere in the world. And one of these enclosures is just extraordinary. It's dropped down into the bedrock and leaving behind 10 pillars cut out of the bedrock that are slightly phallic in nature. And on the west wall, which faces onto the hill itself, is this giant human head, 3 times the size of any normal human head, that's on the end of a long serpentine neck. I mean, it looks like something out of Beetlejuice, to be honest. And there it is. And, this structure, you look at it, I mean, we call it the Pillar's Shrine. The archaeologists call it Structure AB. You look at this, you look down on it and you just think, what the hell was going on here 11,000 years ago? Well, the first clue comes from the fact that everywhere is carved imagery of snakes. There's snakes on the side of T-pillars. There's snakes incised on the walls. There are snakes carved, in abstract form into the bedrock. Snakes are very clearly a primary totem or shamanic animal associated with this site. And once you start looking at the pillar shrine, you start realizing that in itself could itself be a 3-dimensional head of a snake. In other words, they deliberately carve this into the shape of a snake's head, and that those pillars are abstract forms of the actual fangs of the actual snake. Now, so therefore, well, what is this head on the side of the wall? I think that's what we'd call a snake genius, or the active spirit of some kind of snake that the shamans at Karahan Tepe were communicating with, and allowing it quite literally to possess them during altered states of consciousness to enable communication. In other words, so that they could make pronouncements, give information, innovation, technology, whatever. And in many ways, what's going on at Karahan 11,000 years ago is a much more rawer or a deeper form of what was going on at Delphi in Greece with the so-called oracle. Now, this is where you would have a priestess known as the Pythia or the oracle who would sit on this tripod-shaped seat, and the fumes of a dead serpent killed by the god Apollo would rise up, intoxicate her, put her into an altered state, and the god Apollo would then possess her, and she would be able to make pronouncements. And this could decide the fate not only of kingdoms or kings, but even the gods themselves. Now, what's interesting is that Apollo, the manner that he appeared to these priestesses, was not as like some kind of shining sun god, but as a snake. And this was the most common way that communications would take place with the god Apollo, which is something I didn't know until I was, researching this current book. And I think that something similar was happening at Karahan Tepe. The shamans, shamanesses were going into altered states. They were allowing the snake to quite literally possess them and rise up through their body in a manner which we would associate with yogic or tantric practices of in Vedic tradition today. And there's clearly a relationship. I talk about this in the book, the relationship between this culture of Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, and Vedic, influences. It's clear that it's very, very similar, as is Gnostic tradition as well. In Gnostic tradition, to achieve gnosis, oneness with the ultimate supernal God, which was almost like this sort of invisible sun existing beyond the physical universe, you communicated with a snake, a serpent. It was known variously as the good serpent, although there was a bad serpent as well, which I think also had a very important role. But, these Gnostic beliefs were like latter day versions of what was going on at Karahan Tepe. And I can make the link between the two.
As you do in the book.
That Gnosticism actually came from what was going on at Karahan Tepe.
Well, it's all connected. Everything is interconnected. A lot to unpack there, Andrew. Wow. So this place, you're saying, was a ritualistic place for people to allow these interdimensional, extra-dimensional entities to possess them and give them some sort of knowledge. Again, like you said, this has shown up all over the world. Various indigenous cultures talk about the serpents as a common symbol everywhere, literally everywhere. So why is that? Why is it the snake? Are these entities somehow taking on a reptilian frequency that when we perceive them as humans, we somehow associate them with the reptile? Or is it something else? Why is that such a common theme? Why do they show up as this reptilian energy when they overtake people in those situations?
That's a good question. There's two areas that we can go to here. One is why a snake? And the way I look at it is, people are having a lot of ayahuasca experiences, in the modern day. And so often I hear from people who have very little deep understanding of let's say, occult or mysticism, that when they are in, an altered state through ayahuasca, what they see approaching them is a snake that will quite literally come up to them and want to enter inside them. And, this is not something they expected. It's not even something that they feel, safe actually doing. So the general thing is that they decline and eventually come out of it or maybe experience something else. But what's so interesting is that all of them that I speak to says, I wish I had allowed that snake to enter inside me now, because I know that it was benevolent and it was going to give me knowledge and wisdom. And so if people using ayahuasca are having this type of experience, then very clearly people at Karahan Tepe, which I also believe were utilizing, hallucinogens to achieve altered states of consciousness, were also having exactly the same thing. The snake would approach them and want to, excuse me, enter inside them. So that's one side of it. Now, why a snake? It's a difficult one. I mean, there's obviously a lot of hidden symbolism here. The snake has always represented knowledge and wisdom, but it also is very much associated with medicine. It's a universal symbol of medicine, and
Right.
plant medicine is a part of that process. Of course, it is. Whether it be ayahuasca or mushrooms or DMT or anything else, it's all medicine in one way, shape, or form. It can be used for good, and of course, it could be used for bad, poisons and whatever. Always the symbol is the snake. But then we have to ask ourselves, well, if there is an intelligence here, is it real? Or is it something that was simply in their heads? Well, I think it was real. And this is how I basically was able to identify it. There are astronomical alignments at Karahan Tepe. And one of them with the building next to the pillar shrine, which we call the pit shrine, because it has this huge, deep hole in the center of it, almost looking like a mini swimming pool, is that it's perfectly aligned to sunset on the summer solstice. Now, this is amazing in itself, and maybe one of the earliest aligned, sites in the world. But if you wait for 2 hours until it gets dark, you would have beheld something incredible, because at the exact point that the sun went down, you would have seen the Milky Way stretching vertically upwards with the so-called dark rift between it right there. And the area around the horizon is known as the Galactic Bulge. The Galactic Bulge is the bright area of the Milky Way that corresponds to galactic center. And you have 3 constellations around it. The stars of Scorpius, which, although are seen as a scorpion, of course, were also a snake in many ancient cultures, including in North America. You have the stars of Ophiuchus, the so-called 13th sign of the zodiac, which is known as the snake bearer or the snake holder. And he has the stars of the snake itself, in his hands, which are those of serpens. And you have Sagittarius off to the left. Now, these all cradle around galactic center. And of course, galactic center itself is marked by a supermassive black hole. That supermassive black hole recently has been suggested to be an entity in its own right, a thinking, living intelligence. This was the theory that's been put forward by one of the great thinkers of our times, Rupert Sheldrake.
Yes.
He wrote a whole paper on this subject. That basically our sun, as well as the supermassive black hole at the center of our own galaxy, is an intelligence, and that quite clearly it is almost like a localized form of God, because we know that the matter in our galaxy, for the most part, was spewed out by galactic center itself. And thus, in many ways, it could be seen that this intelligence is looking after its own. In other words, everything that's created within that galaxy, including the Earth around us and ourselves as well, because we too are star stuff, as we know. So, so is it possible that the inhabitants of Karahan Tepe were dimly aware that the intelligence that they were communicating with, which they saw in terms of a cosmic serpent, one that was displayed in the sky as the Milky Way itself, the so-called world encircling serpent, that its intelligence, its head, which is the point of the soul, according to their tradition, they always saw the soul as embodied within the head. Were they dimly aware that this intelligence was in the vicinity of what we'd call galactic center today? Now, clearly, they may not have known what we know about galactic center and the fact that they're even in a galaxy. But intuition is a very important thing. We've already
Yes.
talked about this.
I was just thinking the
Is
same
it
thing. It's the
possible?
intuition.
Yeah, I mean, and the book is dedicated to a friend, ex-colleague of mine, well, not ex, but unfortunately a late colleague, and that's John Major Jenkins, who wrote
Yes.
so many good books about 2012, but also an incredible book that everybody should check out called Galactic Alignment. And what this showed was that not only the Maya, but many other cultures around the world were aware of galactic center and saw it as the source of some kind of God, basically. And that, timekeeping and everything somehow was reflected in our understanding of galactic center. And what I show in the book, this was almost a tangent really going away from the main theme, was that the Earth, as part of our solar system, revolves on this cosmic merry-go-round around galactic center on a journey that actually takes 224 million years. Now, that's a long time, I know, but what's so interesting is that recently scientists have identified a cycle in the rise and fall of life on Earth equaling 32 million years. Now, if you divide 32 by 224, as in million years, it's exactly 7. In other words, this journey that we make around galactic center is exactly a sevenfold process, a sevenfold merry-go-round of going up and down, up and down, up and down. Now, clearly, the ancients could not have been aware of this process, but their intuition could have said that creation is connected with the number 7. In other words, that the universe was created in 7 days, or in 7 steps, or in 7 parts. And of course, the stories are very similar, whether they're from Greece, whether they're from Egypt, whether they're from Vedic India, whether they're from Mesopotamia, about the fact that before everything, there is something referred to as the cosmic ocean. It's also known as the primeval chaos or a primeval void, and that into this manifests either an egg or a pearl in Yazidi tradition, and that eventually this breaks open and becomes the vault of heaven and the earth itself, usually through some kind of God interacting with it. And very often that God is seen in terms of a snake that will coil around the egg and, forces it or allows it to break apart to create the universe. And all of this generally is a sevenfold tradition. It takes 7 layers or 7 days or whatever. And what I propose in the book is that this overuse of sevenfold cycles is something that's an intuitive understanding of the Earth's relationship to these greater cycles of time, which can be seen to be fractals of the movement that our solar system makes around galactic center. I mean, for instance, there's something known as the Milankovitch cycle, which determines when ice ages come and go. This is all about the position of the Earth in its relationship to the sun. The length of a Milankovitch cycle is 112,000 years. That's a perfect fractal or fraction of 224 million years. And you can keep coming down to the point that, you've got things like precession, you've got other cycles of the sun, cycles of the moon, cycles of planets. They are all like cogs in a huge Antikythera mechanism, basically. All being turned by a crank handle that is clearly an intelligence that is associated with galactic center itself.
Yes, most spiritual people talk about how if you study the microcosmic aspects of our world, our physical world and our spiritual world, you can translate that into the macrocosm, and that's how you unlock the secrets of the universe. It seems like even with conventional science, that's how we've got to this point where we can understand these very vast concepts. And yes, as we said earlier, there is an intuition that these ancient peoples had. They had a different form of consciousness. It's a type of consciousness we can't comprehend because we've been programmed to interface and react to reality in a specific way. They were programmed to interface with reality in a different way, such a completely different way that we can't comprehend it. And it actually included all of that information, the Akashic information, the other things that allowed these people that lived at these sites to tap into these consciousnesses, such as the living center of our galaxy. And also, like you said, the sun, it's a localized version. Science, like you said, is now saying that the sun is alive. Everything is alive. We know this, but that consciousness is there to show us that there is something bigger. It's not source, but just like the many deities of the Vedic tradition, it's one aspect of source, and we can see it as its beautiful self, also realizing that there's something so much bigger. And again, these people in these civilizations knew this. At Karahan Tepe, they were traveling dimensions, interfacing with these beings and understanding this. Now, Andrew, I have to ask you this because, like you said, we're amongst friends. Have you ever tried powerful psychedelics at these sites, Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, to see what else you could divine instead of doing these other sessions, perhaps psychedelic sessions?
A good question. I mean, the answer in essence is no, simply because, when I go to these sites, I'm in sort of research mode and, information collecting mode. It would be so nice to spend time out at them, and to enter into an altered state of consciousness. I mean, the best that we've been able to do, and we did this in March, was to do sensible meditations at these sites. We did it at Göbekli Tepe. We couldn't do it at Karahan. We did it at the ancient city of Haran, which is, in that area, which is a really important city of the Chaldeans, of the Sabians, the home of Hermetica, and also probably the place of origin of the tarot. We were able to do meds there and at various other sites. So that's how we get our information. I mean, as far as doing it at any other time, I mean, I've done mushrooms in the past when they were legal in this country. I should point this out. I mean, I had some quite profound experiences. I mean, I'm not like some, let's say, prehistorians who will write about, altered states of consciousnesses and shamanisms, but will never touch, any form of plant medicine, which I think is a shame, because you have to really experience that to know how the ancients really thought.
Well, absolutely.
Because for them, it would have been a necessary part of their life.
And there was no stigma.
Rituals and ceremonies.
Yeah, there was no stigma. There was no illegality of these substances. In fact, they were sacred sacraments, and you wanted to do this, and it was an honor to interface with these things. But tell me, because I know we don't have a ton of time, but I want to ask you, how do these sites, from your perspective, connect to the Anunnaki or the Nephilim, this antediluvian civilization pre-flood? There was these advanced beings here. How does this connection happen? Where did you make this connection?
Sure. Well, I mean, the idea of a link between the Anunnaki in this region is something that I wrote about in From the Ashes of Angels in great detail. But what's interesting is that the discoverer of Göbekli Tepe, Klaus Schmidt, in a book he wrote on the site in 2012, very clearly stated that, in his opinion, the actual T-shaped pillars represented the divine ancestors of those that created, the enclosures, and that they were the Anunnaki. But the word he used wasn't Anunnaki; he used the word Anuna, which is spelled Anunna, generally, they're variations of it. This is the Sumerian form of the word Anunnaki, the original form of it. And it means basically possessed of the sky, basically, which you can break down very easily as meaning sky people. Now, some might want to interpret that as meaning that the Anunnaki were indeed space beings that came down here, at a distant point in human history. Personally, I see it slightly differently. I see them as flesh and blood human beings that were different to the indigenous peoples of southeastern and eastern Turkey. They were this shamanic elite that came in, and the reason why they were called the sky people or the people of the sky is because they had knowledge of the sky. They had knowledge of astronomy. They had knowledge of astrology. They had knowledge of cosmology, cosmogony, the creation, the movement, the cycles of the celestial bodies. And it was this that they brought to the fore when they entered into what is today, Turkey. And they had the knowledge not only of the sky, but also how to stop bad things coming from the sky. Because remember, all of this is happening after a major cataclysm and a period known as the Younger Dryas. Right. This was a 1,200-year mini ice age that had been triggered by a comet impact around 10,800 BC. And terrible things had been going on in the northern hemisphere for hundreds of years. Then it calmed down, but you still had this ice age that ends around 9,600 BC, at the exact time that Göbekli Tepe is founded. Wow. And every time a comet would come into the sky, these people would have been in fear that another catastrophe would have happened. Now, Barbara Ham-Clough, obviously one of your guests recently, coined a brilliant term for this, and that's catastrophobia. The idea of people being in fear of another catastrophe happening. And back then, they had no psychotherapists that they could go and consult, and pay good money to. But what they did have were shamans.
Yes.
The shamans were there to tend to any kind of illness, whether it be on a physical or a mental level. And I think that what happened was that this shamanic elite, these bird shamans, these snake shamans, came into the area from somewhere else in the ancient world. We can talk about that, but I think it was much further east in the area of Siberia and Mongolia, and that's where their journey began, and took over the show and basically said to the local people, look, we can ensure that no further catastrophes happen, but for this, you must help us build these structures. They must all look very similar. They must have these T-pillars. They must have, acoustic properties. They must, look in a certain way. We must be able to do certain things in them. And we will use those as easy access into the sky world to deal with the supernatural creatures that were perceived as causing cataclysms. And those supernatural creatures were tricksters, which in North America would be seen as the coyote, possibly the wolf, and in Europe and the Eurasian continent as a whole, it would have been the fox or the wolf generally. The fox's tail is a universal symbol of a comet tail. I go into this in great detail in my book, Göbekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods. And you find foxes' tails on some of the T-pillars, which are anthropomorphized, showing that the priests or shamans would wear a fox's, tail loincloth, which is exactly the same as what the Mayan priests would wear when comets would come into the sky and they needed to deal with them on behalf of the local community. They would put on a fox's tail. And so, in other words, you have these comet shamans, as I called them, who were basically there to prevent any further cataclysms taking place. Now, what these enclosures were also used for is, teaching initiates, for different shamanic practices. They would have also been the the destination of pilgrimages, of people coming from afar. But all of this was, for the most part, going on at Göbekli Tepe, which I see and compare more with a Catholic cathedral, where you have lots of shrines and chapels all dedicated to different saints and the Virgin Mary or whatever. I mean, that is what I see going on at Göbekli Tepe. But Karahan Tepe is a different kettle of fish. There, something much deeper, more rawer was taking place. I think that the people there were truly trying to find out what it all means. So-called ontological questions like, who are we? Why are we here? What's out there? You know, where did this all begin? Where's it all going to end? And they were trying to get answers, and those answers they were getting from the cosmic serpent, the world encircling serpent, the head of which was the galactic bulge, the center of our own Milky Way galaxy.
Wow. So they were downloading this information. It was coming from the center of the Milky Way galaxy from these people at this site because they had intentionally, energetically set that place up for that purpose. They set the intention. It had the energy. They were exploring inner space, outer space as much as they could through consciousness, and they were getting this information from that place. Now, how did we lose our connection with this as humans? How is this all lost history? If these advanced people came, which they did, there's so much evidence of this to teach us, why did they have to leave? Was it a certain time? Could they only hold their physical form for a certain amount of time? What was it that made them leave? And how did we lose contact with this information?
Well, I mean, when we say make them leave, I think we're talking about the human beings that were channeling all of this in the first place, because they eventually do end up leaving southeastern Turkey around 8000 BC, and really thereafter kickstarting what we know as the Neolithic Revolution, which gradually spreads from Anatolia out into Europe, into the Indian subcontinent, into China, etc., etc. So we're talking about a loss of connection more than anything else. So how did that happen? Well, the only clue that we've got is the other big theme of the book, and that's, of course, the Garden of Eden and the serpent and the story of Adam and Eve.
Right.
Now, there's no question that southeastern Turkey, eastern Turkey, is the Garden of Eden. It's said to be where the four rivers of paradise take their rise. Now, they can be easily identified as the Euphrates, the Tigris, the Arxes, which runs into the Caspian Sea to the east, and the fourth river is the Great Azab River, which eventually flows down into Iraq and joins the Tigris River. Those are the four rivers of paradise, and all of them rise in eastern Turkey. So we know that this is where the ancients were referring to when they talked about Eden. It's also the cradle of civilization. Now, there are places within this region that claim to be the Garden of Eden, one of which is Shanlurfa itself. Now, this is the big city. In the Bible, it was called Edessa, that's so close to Göbekli Tepe. It's about 10 miles away from Göbekli Tepe. And this was also a center for this culture. There's this early Neolithic culture. There were sites there as well. And what the story goes, and this is still told by local people to this day, is that God made the soul of Adam and put him down at Shanlurfa, where he used the local red earth to create his body. Obviously, from his rib, they created Eve, according to the story, of course. So they live in the Garden of Eden. And then a serpent appears, and this serpent says, "Why don't you eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge and of good and evil?" So they do this, and they realize that they're naked, they lose their innocence. God throws them out of the garden so as they don't eat of the other tree in the garden, because remember there were two. Right. That was the tree of life and live forever. So according to the local story, they're thrown out, and they go towards the east onto the Haran plain. Okay. Now this is the center of all of these pre-pottery Neolithic sites. And there it is said they create agriculture. However, the first few years, their yield of agriculture is very small. Although I've forgotten a really important point. When they come down to what it is that they're going to grow, Adam says to Eve, well, what are we going to grow then? She said, well, what about this that I brought out of paradise? And she holds up a stalk of wheat. Okay. And he says, yeah, let's go for it. So they plant this wheat, and the yield is not good for the first few years. And then a bull comes along, and they realize they can use this bull to plow the fields and whatever. The yield gets more, and they're very happy. And every year they kiss the bull on the forehead as to give thanks, to what the bull has given them. So what the hell's going on here? Well, the bull is the earth itself. Even to this day, Anatolian Kurdish peoples of the region will tell you that the earth is a bull, and that the horns of the bull hold up the heavens, and that when the bull shakes, you get thunderstorms, you get earthquakes, you get volcanoes. So Adam and Eve, in this story, kissing the bull, basically is just paying their respects to the earth for giving them this fertility, really. So really all that makes sense. But then you say to yourself, well, what is the snake? What is the serpent? What is it? Well, I'm pretty certain that this snake is an abstract memory of the communications that took place between the peoples at Karahan Tepe and this cosmic snake, this Milky Way snake, this world encircling snake that was giving them this knowledge and wisdom. It was allowing them technology and innovation, which, remember, many of the first for humanity all took place in this region.
Right.
Whether it be the first beer, the first wine, the first agriculture, the first growing of wheat. Oh, and one little interesting point here is we always assume that the fruit in the Garden of Eden is a nice rosy red apple, or if not, maybe a pomegranate. No, not at all. The actual word that's used for fruit in Hebrew, I can't remember, it's got out of my head at the moment, but check it out, actually means seed, and it can mean the seed of wheat. And that in certain traditions, particularly in Islamic mysticism, the actual fruit is a stalk of wheat. So in other words, the whole idea of this metaphor, this idea of the eating of the fruit, is basically a metaphor for the creation and the growing of the first wheat.
So essentially,
I find that quite incredible.
Yes, the beginning of agriculture as transmitted by this interdimensional being that's giving him this knowledge, saying, hey, this is how you grow and cultivate these seeds. Wow. Whoa, exactly. What a download. Andrew, what an incredible episode. I know that you have limited time. There's so many questions I want to ask you, but that's okay. We have to bring you back on. But again, you cover all of this in your most recent book, Karahan Tepe, Civilization of the Anunnaki and the Cosmic Origins of the Serpent of Eden. So all the things we're talking about here, all the things we've touched on, we skimmed over so many powerful topics. It's all found in this book. So if you get this book, wherever you get books, Amazon, wherever, you can take the very deep dive. It's a very, very thorough book. I highly recommend it. Andrew, thank you so much for being here. It's an incredible episode. It just zipped by. Is there anything else you want to tell our audience before we go?
Well, no, I mean, just simply, my website is andrewcollins.com, all as it sounds. There's links to everything on there. We do tours to Turkey twice a year. These are research trips, basically. They allow us to get out there to find out the latest discoveries. Not only do we discover stuff, but sometimes, some of our tour guests also make discoveries, which will essentially go down in history. So, come along with us on those. We're also going to Peru, Bolivia and Easter Island next November. When I say we, I mean me and my good friend Hugh Newman and his partner JJ Ainsworth as part of the Megalithomania crew. So, check out all of this information, which is on my website, andrewcollins.com. Also, follow me on social media. All of the links are there on the website, and I'd love to hear from you, whether it be by email or obviously via social media. Follow me on this exciting quest of discovery. I mean, it's an incredible time to live with places like Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe being exposed, being revealed for the first time now. We are finally finding out what the ancients were really up to. And it's such an exciting time.
Yes, and you're there, andrewcollins.com. Like you said, the trips, it's all on the website. And it does seem like all of the hidden knowledge is being unveiled. There's other places around the world, other researchers that are all uncovering this lost knowledge, all seemingly at the same time. Something's going on here. Something's going on for humanity. But thank you again, Andrew. We zipped through this. We're going to have you back on for sure.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me, Jake.
Okay. Well, please hold through the outro music. And again, everyone, andrewcollins.com. We could have went for 4 hours, I have a feeling, but andrewcollins.com. Check it out. And we will see you next week. Midnight on Earth. Everybody, are you still here? This is the afterthoughts, the first afterthoughts of 2025. Hello, everyone. We're back and we have made it to 2025. 2025, we're still alive, and I just want to say thank you to everyone, the listeners, the people out there, everyone that's doing their part in their own way to move this beautiful world forward. To add another brick into the wall of the great work. Transmuting the past into the future that we want, the future that we create, the future that's in harmony with absolute love. It's still going to take a lot of work, people. It's still going to take a lot of work for us to get to that place. We have a lot of work to do. But that's okay. We all have to do the work, and we will. All of this is happening. Nothing can stop it. It is the Earth's transmutation in itself, its own evolution. So in 2025, I just want to say thank you again for being a listener, for spreading the word, for telling everyone about Midnight on Earth, this incredible podcast. So much good is coming this year. So many great guests. So much good on the planet. We are evolving. There are new light codes coming, being received by our DNA. The upgrade is happening. The activation is happening. The ascension of humanity is happening. 2025, we're still alive. It's a numerological year of 9, and that's just fine. Completion. Absolution. The shifting of consciousness, the expansion of awareness. Everything. It's all happening. In this place where we're at now, the realm of the afterthought, this is where we go to reflect and ponder on these great things. My people, my friends, my listeners, I love you so much. Bryn Anderson of Vital Force Herbs also loves you so much. We put in the work. We do the time. We do what we love to help all of us evolve. Isn't that amazing? We can all do it together. Because we are all one. We were always all one. We just got a little tripped up there. But that's okay. Part of ascension is reconnection. Part of ascension is the remembering. So as we float, as we drift here in the dimension of the afterthoughts, let's reflect on the third dimension, the earth plane, and what we can do, what action we can take to make this place better than it was before. What can we do? What talents can we develop and then exercise on behalf of love, on behalf of Source, on behalf of the human family? It's a journey, it's a story, people. It's a story that is unfolding. It's a flower that is blossoming. A new world is being born. If you're listening to this, if you're with me here in the afterthought dimension, you know how much I need your help to spread the word, to tell everyone about this podcast, the guests, and what we offer people, what we are offering, the information that we are putting out. I know that you're very aware of what we're doing. Perhaps you have been helping and getting the word out, spreading the word. Continue to do so, and I thank you so much. We're stepping into a world that's beyond even what we can perceive. There will be new inventions, new revelations, new integrations that will take humanity to that next level. And you're a human. You're a part of it. It's you. Thank you again, my great friends. All of you new listeners coming on even this episode. To the original listeners who were there with me in episode 0, where it all began. Thank you. We're doing this. We're doing this. We are doing this. We are growing every single day. 187 countries now we've covered. These ideas we are resonating with, these understandings, other people all over the world are listening to this and thinking the exact same things. They're feeling that same energy. The afterthoughts, the realm of wonder. Our journey here is coming to a close. But before we leave this sacred place, this special place, this reality created for us and by us, again, let us ponder what is to come. Let us ponder our role in its unfoldment. Thank you, everyone. Continue spreading the word. Continue telling everyone. Continue connecting me with those that need connection. Bless you all. I love you all. This is Jake Weaver, drifting away, floating into the ether of the afterthought.